Mhm.
So today I am very much looking forward to present our ArtEvolve weekly topic, which is making Black Lives Matter in the art world. I am Mackenzie, as you all know by this point, and I am the head of marketing here at ArtCheck. And joining us today is our guest speaker, Sean Green, who is the CEO and founder of ArtEvolve. Thank you, Sean.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Sean, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, bit about myself. Founder, CEO of ArtEvolve. As Mackenzie mentioned, I was born in Jamaica, grew up in Toronto, Canada. Shout out to the Canadians who are watching. And did my schooling in Canada and followed my hustler mom, who's Jamaican mom, into entrepreneurship. She's taught me everything I know. One of the smartest, grittiest humans, and fortunate to have learned a lot that I know about business and dealing with people from her. And I parlayed that into this is my third startup. 2 failures. Or 2 sets of learnings over a couple of years, and then stumbled across the art world in 2012. One of my friends was moving from her corporate gig into becoming an artist full-time. And I basically was like, that is crazy, but I'm intrigued. So I was like, let me come check your artist studio if you're taking this so seriously. And I was just saying that as like a throwaway. And she's like, yeah, sure, come by next week. And I was just like, whoa, you're really serious about this. So I had to show up in her studio, and I was looking around. I was just like, oh my gosh, people are actually going to buy this stuff and you're going to be able to pay your rent. This is wild to me. And so we're no longer focused on the artist, but my empathy brought me into the art world, I typically say. And then, we basically found ourselves behind the scenes focusing on making the gallery more efficient, helping, gallery staff optimize their time and their focus to drive sales and deeper relationships. So that's what we're doing. that's
Yes.
me and
a valiant goal. But your background is in technology, right? You're a developer?
Yeah, I began in software engineering and completed my degree in computer science. And then my learnings over the course of almost the last decade have been in the art world. So I'm a pure now, art and tech hybrid.
Got thrown in the deep end.
Definitely. I'm beyond treading water and working on my front stroke.
Nice. So moving on to our primary topic of today, many of us have probably already seen your powerful Black Lives Matter video message that you made and you put out on your corporate profiles. But for those of us who haven't seen it, will you share with us what the Black Lives Matter movement means to you?
Yeah. It means a lot. Thanks to my team for being like, hey, you should tell your story. I have a great team at ArtEvolve. And I was just like, really? And they're like, yeah. So, we literally just shot it pretty raw and just told the story. It's funny because the morning that I was shooting the video, or the morning that of the day that I was shooting the video, my sister actually reminded me of the airport incident that's in that video where my luggage was taken apart and they were searching through everything, and I was coming back from my grandfather's funeral and just braiding me with questions, including the one asking for my grandfather's death certificate, which I thought was off. But she you push these, I didn't realize how deep I had suppressed that memory and pushed it way down, until my sister was just like, man, she hit me up via email. She was like, man, all these riots must, you must be going through a whole bunch of emotions. right now, with all the protests and everything. And she's just like, I still can remember the day and how you felt when were harassed at the airport. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I totally was just like, wow, this has to be a part of the conversation. And what a lot of people don't realize, is the fact that when you have to go through these things, you literally just have to continue to keep your day moving, right? Like nobody else understands what that is, but your day just keeps moving. When I get pulled over by the police in Beverly Hills while I'm walking, right? It's another instance where, again, it's like my neighbors are around here, like people who could potentially know me. And in their eyes, the way how society indoctrinates you is like, oh, he must be in the wrong here. Like immediately that's where you go. Because of the way how things are perpetuated and the visuals, and the black male is always the aggressor. And, these images are painted in people's minds. And this is why the movement of Black Lives Matter is so strong. And, when you hear that term, like all lives matter, it's like, that's the base case, like the reason why the Black life is elevated, it's because that's the one that's suffering at this particular point. So let's focus our attention over here. But the common denominator is all. And so when I hear people have a gripe about the movement, I'm like, your head is in the complete wrong place. Nobody says that when somebody's like, oh, we're celebrating, or we're having conversation on breast cancer month, right? And everybody's like, but all cancers matter, right? It's like, it just doesn't make any sense. But the movement is powerful because it affects me in multiple ways, and
Sure.
You never get to unlayer this stuff. And yes, you can go see psychologists and things like that, but there's a lot that you just have to go through, especially when you're walking into your offices or your jobs or your galleries, and people don't know what you deal with because you're masking it all the time. But it's a lot that you suppress. So for me, it's important to see these protests that are going on and the energy that's being catalyzed around it. And my fear is that it's going to dissipate too quickly before people can actually put in motion movements that are going to be able to change it for everybody. But hopefully we can continue to keep galvanizing people around the cause, because yes, Black lives do matter.
I think we have to. I mean, at least from my perspective, we don't really have, not that we ever had a choice, but at a certain point, it's just like, it's 2020. Let's just like get this sorted. Let's deal with it. We don't need to, kind of put our fingers in our ears anymore.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we can't stand. Yeah. I mean, I think that's something really important that I think has come up a lot now, at least sort of in like my white communities, is that I think finally people are like, I can't be quiet. Like being quiet is the same thing as being okay with what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So even if it's just about having conversations with, racist family members or, people who voted for Trump or things like that, even just doing things like that, where in the past you might have just said, okay, well, I don't want to deal with it. Like that's a lot of, work and effort and trauma on my end. Well, guess what? Guess how much trauma all of the
it's caused
Black
for 400 years.
and other minority communities are going through. So go talk to your racist grandma, please.
I know. I'm glad that these conversations are being had, though. That's the important thing. My friends of mine that sit on the board of LACMA and like MoMA and things like that, who are collectors, they're like in the past 2 weeks is when they actually have gone and did their own research and really see that it's your skin. It's like it's as basic and as complex as that is, right? It's this weird thing. So it's a lot for people to digest, but I'm glad that the questions are being asked and the conversations are being had.
Yeah. Well, I think, as you know, hopefully we've kind of developed to the point as a society, and also just like cognitively, that we can really be empathetic, like truly empathetic with other people's experiences, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, because you're never going to know if you're a white person what it's like. You never will. It's just
Yeah,
possible.
yeah,
So you
yeah.
have to find out.
It's definitely a thing. It's hard because unless you're in the skin for, for a day or a year or decades, it's hard for you to completely understand.
Hmm.
And there's a mentor of mine, and an advisor of mine named Ken Coleman in Silicon Valley. He's one of the first black guys in
Hmm.
Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
and he was talking to like his white friends. He's got a lot of white venture capitalist VC friends and things like that. And he was like, unless you've ever asked yourself the question, did this happen because of the color of your skin? You will never, you just will never understand it. Because imagine asking yourself that thousands of times over the course of your lifespan. It's a lot for you to compute, and it's a weight that takes up some part of the bandwidth in your mind as you continue to deal with experiences, all the time. If
Right.
it's late and I'm walking down the sidewalk on the street, in my hood, or I travel a lot, so in anybody else's hood, uh, and somebody changes sides on the side of the sidewalk, or grabs their purse a little closer to them. These are things that you're constantly questioning just because society peppers you with the black male image, right? And it's about changing the perspective on it.
Yeah, definitely. Agreed. Um, it, did did Ken, was he originally at Hewlett Packard?
It was Sun Microsystems. So
Aha. Okay.
it's funny
Yeah.
that he's an OG. He's an
Yeah.
OG in
My
the tech
mom,
game.
my mom is on this webinar, and she's an OG too. She launched the first computer system that worked on C at CES.
Wow.
Yes, I just saw she commented, "Hi, mom."
Hey, mom.
Yeah. um, so yeah, no, I just thought that was funny because I know who Ken
Yeah,
is. So okay, yeah, I mean, so let's put this into context of the art world, right?
yeah. Mhm.
So you were, I think, we've talked a bit before about your experience as a Black founder in the art world. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's been an interesting journey. My co-founder Steve, who's on this, Steve Miller. I was introduced to him by one of our advisors, a lady by the name of Lauren Heary, and like one of our initial investors. And she's like, if you're gonna do anything in the art world, you gotta know Steve. And I was like, sure, make it happen. And she was, coordinating the meeting, and Steve was like on his way to Paris for a show that he was doing, and this is like 2013 or something like that. And he's like, I don't have the time. I can't meet with Sean, whatever. And she's like, no, you got to meet him. So we ended up, sitting down. The rest is pretty much history. But Steve, like, basically signed on a napkin that he was going to be a part of the Arternal journey. And
Love
I
that.
don't think he, I don't think he knew what he was up for at a particular time, because I've taken him through a complete roller coaster in the space. But he's had a co-pilot view of, navigating the art world. He'll tell me like, wow, I actually see the art world and how it treats a Black person, because he's a, we're around each other a lot, especially like when we're in New York and at art fairs and, openings and things like that. And it's helped open up his lens to, just how you can be treated. Because I had to learn the art world, and Steve gave me my first sort of lessons, and I'm pretty out there. So he's like, trying to rein me in sometimes, because I have a lot of energy. But, I'm super passionate about, what the problem is. And the new museum fortunately created this incubator called New Ink.
Right.
uh, a lot of different minds who are at the intersection of art, technology, and design are working, in the space. And we got the ability to really test a lot of things, test things about artists, what we wanted to build, and collectors. And it's funny because I started, traveling back and forth between New York and LA. LA is where I'm currently living now, but still spend, a lot of my time in New York. And we were able to make a lot of inroads in LA initially. New York was super stuffy, and you're trying to break in, into the art world and help people understand what you're trying to bring. And they're like,
Yeah.
technology, I've done this, I know what I'm doing, and
Microsoft
all,
Word.
Excel spreadsheets and that. I'm like, yeah, it's cool. I know you know what you're doing. But when I got to LA, and they're like, well, like, how'd you get here? And, why are you working on this? And they're like, oh, the new museum. Sure. We'll give you a shot to kind of come in here and have questions and ask questions. And, when you're building technology, it's a lot of like Q&A stuff, a lot of breaking down processes, how people are working, so that you can be sensitive to their workflows and build tools that will feel native to them. That's
Right.
how people gravitate towards solutions. But I've had an interesting path where, yes, I've dealt with like, racism and things like that from dealers who would ask me stuff from like, how did you get here? And I was just like, well, I came on, I took the A train, and you're just like, no, how did you get to a place where like I'm actually intrigued and listening to you? That was like the undertone of the conversation.
Like they were
And
surprised
like,
or something.
yeah, right. That I could have put string a sentence together that you'd be able to pay attention to. I've had things where like, we're simply following up, like we do with, and somebody calling that follow-up harassment, and it like a follow-up call, like, and it's just like you have these weird experiences. I've had experiences where I've been at an art fair with Steve, and we're approaching, a dealer who's doing nothing, right? Like, we're very sensitive, around like art fairs and things like that, because we, seasoned, being around. And typically if somebody's doing nothing on a, couple of days after the initial hoopla of like a fair, you'll approach them, and the white dealer was just like not paying attention, pointed his finger over to like a junior staff. And then when Steve came up, that same director stood up and greeted Steve. And I was just like, okay, cool. But Steve is just like, no, actually the CEO is that guy over there, so you probably want to be talking to him. And so like, these are just like experiences, and I have a lot more over the course of the last 6, 7, 8 years. But that was my like navigation to the art world. And there's, you don't let one bad apple spoil the bunch, hence why we're still here. Because like, I don't let it, again, you don't let it phase you. There's a lot of good people who've helped me, progress and take stuff to the next level. Sarah's on this call, who's one of the directors at various small flyers. She's a homie. And she supports what we do with Arternal, and so do a lot of other galleries and now auction houses, and art fairs are starting to have conversations with us as well. So
that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're really lucky that you found Steve and he signed on a napkin. I mean, not, we all wish it weren't necessary, I guess, but that he was, is so sort of supportive and forceful about putting you at the forefront,
Yeah. Oh, nice. Great guy.
Yeah. So let's see. So what do you think in terms of, if we're looking at the art world as a whole from all, different angles of whether talking about, the commercial side or the sort of museum side of things, what area do you think is the most inclusive?
Inclusive. The commerce around the Black artists can seem, like it's inclusive. people are interested and intrigued, and so it's causing people to question and do some more research, and actually, I can see myself in museums today and in galleries, which is great. But there's a lot of the art world that's just not inclusive. From the
Sure.
dealers. There's a New York Times article that Robin Pergreman did that was like, there's 281 dealers on Art Basel Switzerland edition online, and not one of them was a Black dealer, and so that
Wow.
was, yeah, right. And so it pulls into question this whole notion around like economic power and economic inclusion, and
Sure.
there's the Black conversation there is like slim to none, right? When you look at Black wealth, particularly in America, it's remained stagnant over the last 70 years, while the gap has grown tremendously. It takes 11 and a half Black families to make the wealth of one white family. So if you just think about that, these numbers are staggering. I'm straddling the worlds of art and technology, which means I got to raise money from Silicon Valley and elsewhere. And when you look at the amount of venture capital that you hear, $400 billion that's been raised for several companies, under 1% of that money goes to Black founders, which is ridiculous. Under 1%. Just 300 Black founders have been funded all time.
Yeah.
And 3,000 founders in general were funded last year. So you just look at that, it's like ridiculous. So when you look at that economic disparity, it's hard. Like, how do you have the backing for Black dealers to be able to, get a jump start? It's hard. It's like, who's going to be able to, put the dollars forward that's necessary for them to have their own startup, as an artistpreneur, right? And have their own gallery that they can be able to foster these artists in their careers.
Definitely.
That's where, like, I feel like something, needs to be in place to support that. So that, again, somebody who's coming up is like, oh, I can actually be, a Black dealer, right? That's important.
Yeah. Well, and in terms of technology, let's see, I think 2019, 3% of those funded were women. So if you then cross-section those, it's what, like 0.003% of founders were Black women. If you don't see yourself represented, then it's much harder to get there.
It's so hard to like feel that can be aspirational and then attained.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm gonna quickly, before we kind of jump into some of the different, parts of the art world where we can make improvements and organizations can action on, I thought I'd put up a poll. So this poll, if everyone wants to answer it, is just, has your institution made changes or started new initiatives in response to the recent Black Lives Matter protests? So yes, but we were already doing lots of wonderful things. No, but we are planning to, or no. I'm just kind of curious. Because then, I'm interested to see also, as we bring in some of these different ways that organizations can make change, then I'm interested to know which of your organizations has done these things or is in the process of doing these things. I think it's great to share information, and you might find out that a colleague at a fellow museum or a fellow gallery is already implementing a type of project that you would like to do. So now you can go talk to them about it and collaborate and get it done.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, just give everyone a second to answer. Okay, almost there. Anyone else want to put in their vote? Okay, perfect. All right, so I will share our results here. So the answer is either yes, So 38% of you said yes, which is the most common. Another 37% said yes, but we're already taking steps towards diversity and equality. No, but planning to. And then a couple of you have said no, but I hope you're at least thinking about it, because that's the step before planning. So I think it's really interesting that this particular, upsurgence of, like you say, attention to the topic, right, has led to, it looks like, a lot of institutions to take first steps.
Yeah.
So that's
Positive.
That's positive. Yeah, that's good. Okay, thank you everyone for answering that. So let me see, let me just save this. All right, so let's talk about, based on some of your experiences, like you were saying, where people weren't necessarily used to seeing sort of Black professionals in the space.
Mm-hmm.
What about, diverse hiring and diverse boards and things like that? How can organizations sort of take steps towards doing that?
Yeah. I mean, there is, your hiring practices are definitely key, and when you go out, to choose if somebody bows out of being on the board and you have an open position, I think it's making that effort to be able to be like, well, let me have a wider lens for my approach. Let me not just try and choose the usual suspects, because then change doesn't really happen, or you don't get a variety of voices. And that's the problem. Like, you've seen it with like Gap campaigns and, campaigns that just go wrong. And you're like, they definitely didn't have a woman at the table. They definitely didn't have a Black man or woman at the table. They definitely didn't have somebody who was LGBT at the table, or, you need to have a wide variety of voices, so that, because, we're serving a population that is of diverse background. And, you want to make sure that a voice is heard that represents who you're trying to bring in. It reflects in your audience as well. If you want to have a diverse audience, you have to be able to understand and be able to communicate to them well. So I think, as these board positions open up, it's about opening your lens. I'm a big proponent of making sure I have, diversity on my team. And also, like, on, especially in engineering, where they're like, are there any women engineers or developers? I'm like, no. Like, we make sure, when I talk to my CTO, I'm like, make sure we're looking at women and bringing a woman on our engineering team. It's just, it's very key, because how the heck do you, like, if you get way behind the 8 ball, on that, it's hard to pull yourself back, because a woman who comes into your org and is just like, oh, there's only dudes here.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing at that point,
Yeah,
right?
right.
The
But if they come in and like, oh shoot, you have women in here. Oh, great. I can actually feel like I'm home. There's somebody else for me to be able to hang with or talk to. So, when you can get yourself behind the 8 ball really quickly, and then it's hard to unravel after the fact, right? We've seen tech companies struggle with that. And so, even, having diverse hiring practices
Uber.
yeah. Exactly. Having diverse hiring practices, as a gallery, is definitely key. And you hear this, like, are there Black people in technology? Is it a pipeline issue? It's like, no, pipeline is not the problem, right? There are people who care.
Also,
There's a
it's
lot
not a
of
manufacturer. It's not a factory. It's
yeah. There's a lot of people who care about the art world. There's a lot of people who would want to be in. There's a lot of people, just like in technology, it's like, you just have to be receptive towards it, right?
Yeah.
And it's about, being able to, figure out, where, I know, where are the schools that you should be possibly looking at, or the MBA program or the MFA programs and things like that, where students are coming out, and, maybe having a sort of apprenticeship where people like are intrigued and have some sort of apprenticeship program that they can come in and learn how you sell art, how you're an artist liaison, how you're a registrar, how you do different things, because there's different roles within the gallery. And there's plenty of people who are in these BFA, MFA programs, Sotheby's programs, that would love to be able to participate and be hired and be a part of this industry.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you think about, the cop out, I'll call it a cop out, that a lot of, hiring managers say where, okay, maybe for some reason there aren't very many Black or minorities or women for a particular role available. So where do you think that starts, and how can we impact that?
Yeah, I think it starts with ignorance is where it actually starts. Just the not knowing, but it also there's laziness that's a part of that as well, because you need to put in the work, right?
Hmm.
Like you can't just sit back and think that it's just going to come to you. But if you put in the work, if you have conversations, if you're going to these different schools, if you're putting out, in your job description, what you're looking for, how you're trying to diversify your team, you will get applicants who are going to fit or conform to what you put out there. But if you don't
Yep.
put in the work with your team to be able to put it out there, you're not going. The right people are not going to gravitate towards you. And then if you
Sure.
don't do the work yourself, you're not going to be able to find those people.
Yeah.
Also, it's a two-way street.
Well, and also, I mean, if you feel like there aren't enough candidates that are coming out of these schools, right? Let's say,
Yeah,
then you need to go earlier, and your organization can do something about that, right? So if
that's definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, there's a lot of schools out there. Even at Phillips recently, they're even thinking, they're one of our clients, the auction house, and they're even thinking of having some sort of program where they can pull in schools just to even understand, like, what is the auction house, like, how does
Yeah.
this all function? It's so exciting and things like that. And you can do that at multiple different levels. You can do that, museums, galleries, auction houses, and pull in these different, from grade school to mid school to high school, to these post-secondary education institutions, and bring them in, have them get absorbed, because that's how you
Mhm.
create that sort of, farm team, as they say in sports, that next generation of who's going to come
Yeah.
up and be able to take the industry over.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just about being like, here, look at this nice art, goodbye, right?
Yeah.
It's also about telling them, look, there are people here who do these jobs, right? So
Right.
there are curators and conservators and dealers, and
Right.
this is what each of them does, just like a fireman and a policeman and a teacher.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
widening the lens.
So, yeah. So I'll also say, just in terms of getting more art in these schools, it might be interesting for, all those museums out there, collections who are thinking about doing some deaccessioning in the coming years. So essentially getting rid of parts of their collections, right, to save money and space, to think about where those collections go. And if you have stuff that, you don't consider valuable, but still is valuable in the sense of it has educational, value, that can go to schools, all of that can go to schools that maybe don't have the cash or the budget to purchase art for their classrooms and for their hallways. So tell us about partnering with Black owned businesses. So not just hiring, but also bringing in, partners in the same
Yeah.
vein.
Yeah, it's kind of along the same conversations, in terms of hiring. Taking or doing an audit of your vendors is definitely key.
Hmm,
Who's doing your
that's a good one.
shipping, where are you purchasing materials from, you know um uh you know what, like, talk to your artists, and how would they like to be able to help, because artists have a strong voice, and they might have ideas as well as how they would like to have some sort of impact, and they can have that impact through the gallery if they don't have their own means. And so you know for us, I'm the only Black CEO in the software space, I think, probably in the art world, period. But now people know that you can actually do this, right? You can build tech, in the art world, and be a part of, things like that. And I'm fortunate to have the galleries who choose us as a vendor of, of theirs from the software perspective. But it's very important to again take stock of, who are you providing, or paying for your services, and how do you take a larger view of, who's out there who could be servicing you as well, so that you can have, a diverse set of talent who's servicing your
Yeah,
business.
yeah, definitely. Oh, apparently one of our staff, I didn't know this, Lee Cavalier started a charity for art professionals to speak to school kids in less affluent areas called the 16. All right,
Awesome.
Lee, got to get you in these conversations. So what about, and this is something that's been in the news a lot recently, which is, a lot of our sort of institutions, particularly big name museums and collections, often have the names of people who, have problematic affiliations or problematic pasts or were slave owners or things like that. How do we deal with this kind of, with having, these statues and these institution names in our spaces? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a tough one, which is why it's like kind of controversial. The toppling of the statues and things like that. It's allowing people. What's interesting is allowing people to have dialogue and have conversation around who these statues are and what these statues mean. But even people who support nefarious activity and sit on these boards. That's another thing, right? So it's taking out of the people who support your institutions. There's a lot of money out there that's dirty money, and sometimes it's hard when you're trying to survive as an institution. What you should do. But again, there's a lot of good people, out there as
Yeah.
well. That it might be less money, but it can help to thrive. And so it's for me, I always think about it from the perspective of if our lens is narrow, we're not going to be able to really fulfill what we want to do and make the change that we want to make with clean hands. And so if we have a wider lens, we can be able to understand who, maybe I don't take this one person and maybe I go out there and find 10 other people that can equal to that one person.
Yeah.
When it comes to
Right.
like people who are sitting on your boards or funding your galleries or things like that. Just takes a little bit more work from the things like the statues. It's being Lava Thomas has a pretty interesting story. She's from San Francisco. Lava Thomas, dope artist, who she was she basically won the ability to have her statue was going to be a Maya Angelou statue, like go up. And they basically, subverted that and negated her win, or to be able to put the statue up, because of a lady who basically like white lady who wielded her power, and was not going to let Lava, black artist, be able to. She went through with merit, won on her own merit. But yeah, it's a story that should be read, because she was definitely done a huge disservice. And my daughter's name Maya, my 7-month-old name is Maya, so named after like Maya Angelou, because she's just a strong human being, or was a strong human.
Well, I mean, I think obviously, and you were telling me before as well that it's jarring to have this experience where you're walking through your everyday and then you walk by a statue of someone who used to keep people that looked like you as property. I mean, that must be
it's crazy, and it to be elevated and just in your face is a thing. It's crazy because there's such a storied history with how Black people came to America. And the fact that the current establishment celebrates these things by like punishing people to the extent of the law, which is the new executive order for toppling like any of these statues, rather than paying attention to what's the underlying issues. That's another problem in and of itself. But yeah, I mean, you have to walk around day to day and see these things, and what I like that's going on now is people are having the dialogue, having the conversation, understanding things like Juneteenth and like what Juneteenth means to, Black Americans, and the fact that people are pushing for that to be a national, paid holiday, I think is a great conversation. So,
that visibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's a museum, I can't remember who they are, so anyone remind me if they do, who has taken down the statues of, I think it might have been in the UK, where they had slave trader statues out front of their museum and their institution. And they actually have taken them down, but they're putting them inside as a permanent exhibition that includes all the history of, why originally they were put up, and the background of these characters and why they were taken down, right? Oxford. Oh, thank you, Melissa. Yes, Oxford University. So I feel like that, we don't need to just take down the statues and then like burn them in the back and never talk about them again, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's important. The problem with America is it tells, the white history. And from what I've learned, the Black history is never told. It's just like swept underneath the rug. And so you hear it in these piecemeal, bite-sized, chunks.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that it was a Black lady who actually created GPS. Just think about that. Like GPS and like your navigation in your phone, the Black lady created that. Nobody really talks about that stuff. It's an important part of history. It's an important part of how we interact today, right? So, there's these stories that need to be told. Hidden Figures, which was done by Pharrell, is another one, that, people have seen that showed the story of how a Black lady was integral in putting, a white man into space.
I love that movie.
Yeah,
in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, what about dedicated art spaces for Black communities or for other minorities? Do you think that's something that's important?
I definitely think it's important. I think I was talking about, when we spoke, how I was seeing myself in these museums now, and I was just like, is there too much of us in here? And I was just like, wait, and because like I'm like, wait a second. When I go to all these galleries and these openings, I'm like, I see a lot of white figures in paintings and sculpture and things like that, and I was just like, oh, we're just getting started. Like it was one of these things where I'm just like, oh my gosh, but it's great, what's happening, and to be able to see this, and so again, like having institutions that can actually like fast forward your ability to kind of understand your history and understand things about yourself and your culture that the art world does. Like I couldn't stand history in school, like for nothing. Give me math, give me computers, give me like this other side, but like history, I was just it was just a bore to me. The way how the art world teaches you history is fantastic. Like, I love it. I love learning about the history of like the work, the paintings, the sculpture, everything. Like the way how the art world, this is where I get all my history learnings. So it'd be great to have institutions that can help fast forward that as well for people who are like me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and even galleries, like you were talking about doing an audit for your partners, you can also do an audit for, what works you exhibit in from who.
Right? Yeah. And it doesn't have to, like, you don't have to force it, right? It doesn't have to be a reach. It can really be like, look at your programming thesis, and find the artists who are out there working and have different practices, but that meld around or conform to your thesis that you have for your gallery. So it really seems natural and organic when you pull that artist, that's a Black artist who studying at Yale or whatever, and you pull them into your gallery and have them on your roster. You can very eloquently speak to the fact that this artist matches what I do. Not just you're gonna pluck a Black artist just to have them and check the box, right?
Sure. Sure. They have to be a good fit, but I think it would be very rare that you would not be able to find any Black artist or artist of color who was not a fit for your thesis somewhere in the world, right? Yeah, that would be exceptional, I would say. So what about, I think this is something kind of introduced to you. It wasn't something you thought about a lot, but about repatriation of art.
Yeah. It is everything. I think I was talking about like the way how the Asians have bought back their art for like 10 times the price. And being able to have, I mean, that, you know, from a Black culture perspective is almost impossible. But, you know,
Sure.
you know, some of this art, you know, it was colonialism that you know, is how, you know, America has some of its art. I think I was reading an article like at the Brooklyn Museum, you know, it has the reason why it has a lot of, you know, some of the art in there is through colonialism. And, you know, how do you, you know, account for that or have that repatriation? It's a controversial conversation.
Yeah.
But you know, work definitely needs to be done there.
Yeah. Well, it's the same in Europe, right? So even if you just look at, you know, countries with more power versus less power, like there's always a big discussion about the marbles from the Parthenon in Greece that live in the British Museum. So
Mhm.
Greece has never been happy about that. But, you know, especially if you look at the fact that because of a lot of the like archaeological colonialism that went on in the 1800s, so particularly in areas like Egypt, you know, Berlin and London, they have huge Egyptian collections. Like Nefertiti's head um, is in the Berlin Museum, and so
Wow.
and still is. You know, it's never gone back to Egypt.
Right.
So I think that those types of conversations are important because if you essentially take the heritage away from the country, you're
Yeah.
also taking away, you know, some of the, well, obviously their heritage, their history, but also why people would want to go there, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. Right. So that's a
Yeah.
whole, you know, to travel
Yeah.
to Berlin,
So,
Egyptian history is kind of weird.
which I did. And then I felt really weird about it. So that's why I'm talking about this. It's like, it was
Yeah.
like a personal experience where I went there because I'd heard about how good the museum was. And I realized it was almost like entirely an Egyptian collection. I was like, so how did this all get here?
Yeah. Right. And then you start thinking about the world that we live in and the people that make it happen.
Yeah, or who are now dead, long dead,
Yeah.
who made it
Yeah.
happen. You know, we can go beyond that. It's time for us
Mhm.
to go beyond that. The Napoleonic looting, yeah, yeah, exactly. This has happened in many circumstances.
Right.
So, and I think, you know, another thing too, potentially to consider for this is not just repatriation of art, but also the loaning of art from sort of, you know, wealthier countries to less wealthy countries, because particularly with, you know, kind of pivoting slightly to climate change and
Mhm.
the fact that a lot of, you know, developed or very, I'm just going to say really wealthy countries have really high climate controls in their museums, right?
Mhm.
So just like the US and the UK are really great examples, but all across Europe. And so they sometimes won't loan to museums in the Caribbean or in, you know, parts of Africa that don't have the strict climate controls. And so the
Right.
art doesn't travel.
Yeah. No, I think that's key. I mean, having organizations that, you know, it's about bringing these things to light, which I think, you know, that's what these conversations are doing in multiple ways. Um, but you know, art needs to be seen.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm a big proponent of that. The whole, I love technology and its intersection with art. Um, but the in-person experience is everything. Sometimes that's where the real emotion comes out. You're like, why is this tear in the corner of my eye? Just for, you know,
Yeah.
it's because, like, you know, a JPEG doesn't do that. A JPEG is a facilitator, but seeing it in person, and when I hear about things like this, I'm just like, wow, there needs to be organizations that can help, you know, fund the ability for to even, you know, it might be a huge undertaking to make sure that those museums are in the shape that they need to be to allow these traveling exhibitions to happen. But you know, technology's advanced a lot, and you know, it's all about, you know, finding the right ways to put the capital in the
Right.
right hand.
Well, and also we have so much more data available to us that, you know, for example, the Bizawait protocol that is essentially allowing museums to decrease their climate controls.
Yeah.
If that were actually put into place, there would be a lot more museums where, you know, having exhibitions would be acceptable because
Right.
it's actually been found that it wouldn't hurt the work.
The work.
So
Yeah. Again,
yeah,
that's knowledge that needs to be shared and passed around for sure.
yeah, yeah. So what about being good allies and advocates. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people in the room, or some of us, you know, are white. And what can we do in our everyday to not put
Yeah.
all of the burden on you?
Yeah. Definitely it is like, I have a lot of friends who are now taking it upon themselves to do their own research. I think it's not just, questioning, because it's like, we've been through all this. We know that this stuff is happening, you know, put that extra effort into to educate yourself, to understand, what's going on. Whether it's, watching, documentaries like The 13th by Ava DuVernay, or reading books, that help you to understand, what's happened.
Yeah.
I think, that allows you to have deeper conversations with those who are around you. If you've got employees that are working for you that are Black, don't be afraid to approach the conversation when something like a George Floyd happens, right? Where it's just like, I've been in conversations where, people who work for, big corporations, are like, I don't know, I didn't know what to say, or I didn't know how to communicate. And it's like, well, all you need to do is take the first step and just try and find out how the person's feeling, right? That's
Yeah.
like hugely key to opening up a dialogue. You may not know everything, but, today I think there's sensitivities on both sides. One being like, I feel like I'm too ignorant, from the white perspective to be even able to approach it. But on the perspective of somebody who's Black, it's like, it's okay. We understand you don't know everything, but the fact that you care is like everything, right?
Yeah.
And so that empathy, but with a level of candor is super key. And it starts at home. It starts with how you're educating the people who are the closest to you, and
Mm-hmm.
that's your part that you can do.
Yeah.
Because I have one of my clients works for a gallery in Mexico, and he's biracial, and he had the conversation in recent weeks with his white grandparents that he never had, like,
Hmm.
in the 30 plus years of his life. And I was just
Wow.
like, wow, that's
It's big.
wild, and that's happening like right now. And so it's great and also important that these conversations are being had.
Yeah.
And in your workplace, at your home, and doing your own research, I think, are the three places.
Yeah. Well, and if anyone is interested in the psychology behind why white people don't speak up, recommend checking out this book. It's called White Fragility. It's in the New York Times bestseller list. But it's just, I think sometimes, because even if you're like a very liberal white person, but you feel like you can't speak up because you don't know enough, some of that actually comes from systemic racism. So I think it's really important to sort of identify the cause of that anxiety and get over it, because it's, yeah,
Yeah.
no more time to be quiet.
Yeah, the whole white privilege conversation is wrapped up in that as
Yeah.
well. Because people kind of get lost in like the associations around privilege, like, oh, that means that I'm rich, and I have money, and I'm able to do lavish things. That's not all privilege. Like, the fact that if you're in white skin, you're afforded certain things that somebody who's in Black skin is not, just by de facto that you have a different color skin. That's the
Yeah.
privilege that needs to be understood.
Yeah, definitely. And that there are different types of privilege, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they can compound on each other. So different
Exactly.
white people can have different amounts of privilege based on different things.
For
So
sure.
yeah, definitely. Yes, thank you, Robin DiAngelo. Correct. Um, Thanks, Mom. So yeah, let's see. Buy books about racism, race and racism by Black authors. Yes. Talith, I definitely agree, 100%. I think that this book I recommend only for the reason of it's white people talking about white people problems. if that makes sense. So it's
Mhm.
not about systemic racism so much as it is about why you as a white person are not speaking up about systemic racism, right? But about the entire issue, 100%, right? Let's see, some good ones. Someone mentioned the 13th in the comments. Have you seen that on Netflix, Sean?
Oh yeah, 13th is great.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing. Ava
yeah.
DuVernay is just brilliant. And she's doing a lot of things, that are about the cause. But you really
Mm-hmm,
understand, mass incarceration in the U.S. and why it happens. I don't know if people know. Some people may know Agnes Gund or Aggie Gund. I think she's on the board of MoMA. Speaking of boards, like
mm-hmm,
there's the show the boardroom show, I think underscore the underscore boardroom. That's an
mm-hmm.
Instagram tag. It's now showing how white these boards are, which it's been known, but that
Yeah.
Instagram it's really putting it out there. And it's crazy how white these boards are.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's another thing. But I think I just like lost train of thought because I went like straight there. But you
Yeah, no,
asked.
no, but 100%. No, I was just saying, like, any, if you've seen the 13th or any
Oh
other,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think another one
right,
in The New Jim Crow is very good, also by a Black author.
right.
So yeah, so let's see. We're just about at 7. So let's finish up here in terms of, because you have a background in technology, how can organizations use technology to better support Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, I think like social is definitely key. Being able to use your social media reach,
Hmm.
to be able to be a part of the conversation and put it out there. I don't think things should be done discreetly because like if your peers don't see that you're stepping out, that's a thing. I think being able to put things into action, not just, leverage your social reach, but be able to put things into action. In the tech industry, there are different like tech startups that are masking like, ethnicity and like, you know, your race, and you're able to submit applications, you're able to review applicants,
Hiring technology.
and yeah, so
Yeah,
the hiring technologies that are key, for you to be able to pull in the right people into your
yeah,
organization. That's another
yeah.
like key way that you can be able to, leverage technology. And I think
Hmm.
those two ways are key, but also you know just being able to keep track of your own data, being able to keep track. And I think the industry should. I think there should be an industry-wide like consensus in terms of how many Black people are on these boards, are in these organizations, are in these galleries, and things like that, so that we can have a metric by which we're like looking at and trying to increase. And if we don't leverage or have data, it's hard to make an impact. And we say that with our Eternal, we allow galleries to have a lot of their own data and make use of it. And so we think that
Hmm.
data is key everywhere. And being able to have data to track, how many Black people are being hired, or the people of diverse backgrounds that are being hired by these institutions, are definitely key. And
Yeah.
I think we even talked about crowdfunding and like fundraising and just being able to leverage those sources, to
Yeah,
make.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think, let's see, just in the tech space, I know Artsy has done a really large initiative. They're matching like $1 million or something from
Mhm.
proceeds to Black Lives Matter organizations. I think, as well, if you don't have money, you don't need to give your company's money, right? You can do, like we were talking about, crowdfunding.
Mhm.
So, or percentage of, donations or things like that.
Yeah,
So it looks like we have some questions. Are you up for some questions, Sean?
sure.
Cool. Okay. So let's see. This is interesting. So apparently, the new museum is notorious for racial injustice to their staff, which I didn't know. They have some of the worst practices in New York City. How do we promote institutions that create programs for justice, but do not have the same goals for their BIPOC employees?
Yeah. I mean, I can speak from my perspective. We're part of the incubator at the new museum, which is like, it's more of a parent-child relationship. And they've done a lot, especially in the last couple of years, to really diversify. I was 5 years ago, I was one of two Black people in the new museum incubator, right? And now it's a lot more diverse. There's more Black people, more people of all backgrounds, who are part of the incubator at the new museum. So I know a lot of work has definitely been being done there. And Lisa Phillips definitely is not a proponent of that, but definitely being able to have that conversation. I'm sure that conversation is being had amongst the staff, and if people understand the organization and working within the organization, the people who are around there, I've never felt it, and we straddle between both the incubator and the museum itself. So, I really don't have much to say in terms of like that topic, other than, I'm sure that conversation is being had internally.
Yeah. So Linda Endersby says, my answer to the poll was no because of leadership. Interesting. On another point, we don't have a board and we're not going to be able to hire anyone anytime soon because of financials. It's not a priority. Do you have any suggestions for how we can still get a variety of voices to the table?
Yeah, I think having, there's things called like town halls, but I think bringing in people who have had that expertise, outside of your organization to have that conversation, right? Sometimes not your own resources that you need to rely on, but leverage the resources of other institutions, leverage the resources of your peers to be able to come in and have those conversations.
Yeah. And I think also, like Anik actually mentioned above, that you can have guest curators come in, right? Who, maybe do it as a donation of their time. Not because, we ask for free labor from the BFUC people, but more like, those who have the time and the money to donate, they can, say, I want to do an exhibition about this topic. Can I sort of put this forward and help you organize it, right? So
and then
if you reach out,
leverage technology and crowdsourcing to be able to fund it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you can find ways to fund these things. And Linda, if you want to have a conversation about the technology behind that, I'm more than happy to. I have a big background in crowdfunding. Let's see. This has been wonderful, and unfortunately I have to hop off. I especially like Sean's point about skin color. It's as simple as that and as complex as that. I have a few questions that have been on my mind, especially recently, so I'll put them here with hopes. Okay, hold on, let me get down to the question. Let's see. Wow, so many questions. I'm gonna try to get to a couple of the good ones because we're over time. Okay. How do we balance keeping our organizations afloat, continuing with planned content, injecting more topics about Black artists? Is it okay to balance? Should we, at this moment, be concentrating more on Black and POC stories?
I think it's a moment right now where you can have the dialogue and conversation. Budgets are always an issue. You never, like, two things that you never have enough of are you never have enough time and you never have enough money. That's just like always a constant. But what you need to be able to do is take a moment right now to be able to understand what you can do and create a sort of action plan. Because if you don't have an action plan in place and you don't keep yourself accountable, you'll never be able to get to where you'd like to be, even if it takes time, right? Nothing is going to change, is not going to happen overnight as much as we'd like it to. But as long as there's a sustained game plan, then, and you have a team that wants to execute around you, that's the most important.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's see what else. Oh, can you finish your thought on Agnes Gund? You only mentioned her name.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's good. I think maybe I lost track.
Bad.
But yeah, so Aggie Gunn, or Agnes Gunn, people may or may not know that she has like Black or biracial grandchildren. And she sold a painting recently. I think Stephen A. Cohen bought it for like $100+ million. And she donated that to causes around, you know, mass incarceration and remove and trying to get rid of that, and helping, you know, with her purse strings, you know, again, helping people who are getting, you know, thrown in jail for no reason, or thrown in jail under these, like, you know, 3-strike rules that were in, and being able to help against this like 13th law, which is basically modern day slavery.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Definitely. I mean, I think something that, although, you know, besides Facebook's dubious, you know, belief in investment practices, they do have a very interesting thing right now where you can actually choose a fundraiser for your birthday. And so, you know, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, just giving this as an example. A couple weeks ago was my birthday. I will toot my own horn on that. Yeah.
nice. Happy
Uh,
birthday.
thank you. And one of the options that I could choose, you know, there are a lot of sort of charities or foundations that work on these type of things that are in the Facebook approved list. So there was the NAACP, a lot of other organizations, and I chose the Bail Project. And just out of me posting that on Facebook, I got, you know, 177 euro, $200 donated by my friends and family during my birthday. So it was, I mean, it took me like 2 minutes, right, to put that up. So there's a lot of things that even as an individual, I think you'd be surprised what you can do. You know, if every single person put one of those fundraisers for their birthday up on Facebook for, you know, the Bail Project or the NAACP, or, you know, Black Trans Foundation, or whichever, you'd be amazed how much money can be raised.
Right.
You know,
And the difference that it can make, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, great. Thank you, Louise, for the link of Aggie Gunn's Art for Justice Fund. So just to put this on the other side, Steve is mentioning that the 55% of employees of color at the new museum, and apparently this might be a misinformation campaign, so something good to just look at. Let's see. Any advice on staying true to your organization's goals when some of your audience and even some of your staff or boards may have more extreme beliefs, either extremely conservative or extremely liberal?
Yeah, it's interesting because you can have polar, you know, conversations within. I think the advice there is having third parties that come in and have the conversation, because sometimes, you know, you can string too far left or string too far right. But I think bringing in more seats at the table who you know, are of diverse backgrounds, I think that kind of helps to illuminate certain things that are not visible, just from the people who exist in it day to day. I think bringing people who can bring new, fresh conversation about the topic is super key.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing too is that
stay very insular, you know, you
yeah,
know, within these organizations. And so, you know, it's having people from the outside, you know, help you dig deeper on particular topics and conversations.
yeah, 100%. The other thing too, and you know, if you're worried about, I guess, making people upset, is, I mean, especially if you're thinking about your audience, then at a certain point, I think you kind of have to decide, is it important enough to you to not say anything to keep this small portion of your audience happy, right? I mean, you know, Nike went into this when they had Colin Kaepernick be the face of their ad campaign after he was cut from his contract for kneeling during the national anthem. So, I mean, they're a large company and they have probably a lot more money to be able to take that hit. But at the same time, in the long run, I think we're all going to kind of have to make that decision, right? Is it really worth it?
That's true.
So, yeah. Okay, let's see.
I apologize.
Yeah, grab another one. Okay, so this is interesting. So Annika, CEO, or who you know, of Artitech, says that she attended a a workshop on sexism in fundraising the other day. And it was interesting about how there's an unconscious bias made by investors who frame questions differently to coach men and make women defensive. I think it's the same thing also in terms of skin color, right? So they can tend to be more accusatory when they're speaking to some people rather than others.
Definitely.
Yeah, but Annika is saying is that there's a process you can take to retrain, you know, yourself as an investor or as a manager or as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, there is, and I think one of the things is like, you know, as venture funds, if we're talking about like, you know, getting investment and, you know, male and females, you know, sitting down, you know, the white male dominates, you know, receiving funding from, you know, venture capital. But yeah, whether you're a person of color or you're a white woman, you know, it's a struggle to be able to get access to venture capital. There are ways for, you know, what I call them, the establishment, to be able to retrain themselves. Mm-hmm. But also, you know, people who are LPs, like these foundations and these endowment programs, they have these stringent ways where like the people who really want to make change are not a part of the establishment. And I think that needs to change because, you know, if there's new people who will understand the conversation better than anybody who's currently writing checks at the table right now. Mm-hmm. But then they're looking for experience, and it's like, well, how do you get that experience? And you know, they're not going to give you that, you know, $10 million or $30 million that you need to fund new founders with this new lens. And so, you know, you're relying on these people's husbands and wives and relatives to be like, oh, I actually had that problem that the lady who you were sitting around with who was looking for capital had. So yeah, while there are ways and means to be able to retrain these people's minds, I really do think, you know, the people who have the purse strings, who are funding these funds, need to have a wider view of, you know, who they're cutting capital to and what that thesis for that fund is, so that they know who's going to be able to spend their money the way how they'd like to see it spent for social.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, particularly think about museums and looking at donors, you know, the days of having 1, 2, 3 enormous donors, you know, may be coming to an end. I mean, again, looking at crowdfunding as, you know, technology as a resource, if you don't have one person to answer to, but 3,000, you're going to have a much more diverse variety of opinions and therefore a much more sort of balanced, you know, voice coming at you for whatever initiative you're raising money for. Totally. So, and also, if you're raising something for something specific, if you're like, look, we want to raise money to do a Black Lives Matter exhibition, for example, okay, then if you want to do that, the people are going to donate to that particular effort are going to be those who believe in it, right? It's not that you have to go to your existing donor and try to pitch them on this idea. It's the reverse. You're pushing some amazing, interesting ideas out there, and people are coming to you because of that content. So this isn't like marketing theory, right?
Yeah.
but
they're aligned. They're aligned with the mission. You're pulling in the right people who are aligned with the mission. Yeah.
Exactly, and it's really, really important because then you're no longer tied to someone who has opinions that may not match those of the people who are working every day lower down in your institution, right?
Right.
Yeah, super important. And there are large organizations who are now doing this. So for example, organizations like UNICEF, Save the Children, the World Food Program, they're all moving to small donor subscription models because they don't want to rely on governments, because they don't want to be accountable to governments anymore, right? Yeah. They don't want to only accept money from governments and have to therefore follow their policies, right? Or their whims. So I think it's, something we can look at in the art world as being a potential direction to move in.
For sure.
Yeah. So Sean, any last words? Anything else you'd like to add?
I mean, I hope the conversation has inspired some thought. Definitely, appreciate you having me on and being a part of the message that the world is trying to have a conversation about, which is Black Lives Matter, and hopefully those who are participating are looking inward and looking within their organizations to be able to expand the conversations there, and make impact and change. Hopefully you follow what we're doing at Arternal. You can hit me up at Sean_Arternal. Arternal spelled just like internal, but with ART, so ARTERNAL. And our company,
put the
Arternal,
link into the chat.
Yeah, is on Instagram. It's _Arternal_. And that's where you can find us and participate in how we help to provide technology to the art world.
Yeah, and if any galleries or other institutions, commercial institutions, are interested in talking to Sean about Arternal and its technology, then just hit up this link. I'll also make sure that it's included in the recording page. And if you go to the contact us page and you include company-ArtEvolve, then he'll know you'll come from us, and I'm sure he'll give you a nice deal.
Sure.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate it for taking your time and your energy to talk about, this very important topic with our community. And I look forward to having you on maybe again sometime soon.
Sure. No, definitely. This is fun. I'm glad that you invited me on, and appreciate your time as well. And let's continue to make a difference.
Sure thing. Sounds good. All right, everyone. Have a great, for those of you in the US, day off tomorrow. And we will see you all next week.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right. Bye now.